Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
For you right away to stories in this video.
The unsuspecting wife didn't know her husband was craftier than she was, and this is what came of it. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. The difficulties began on October 15, 2010, at 7:30 a.m. I was at Wilcox Airfield waiting for my flight to Nassau when two men in ill-fitting suits approached me. They stopped in front of me, and I looked up from my iPad at their two impassive faces. "Mr. Kavanaugh, would you like to come with us?" asked one of them politely. "You're welcome," he added. "Who are you, and what do you need from me?" I asked. "I'm Special Agent Washington, and this is Special Agent Brown." "We're from the FBI," the second man replied. "Can I see your ID?" I asked. They pulled out their laminated badges, and the photos matched. Since I had no idea what a real FBI badge looked like, I took their word for it. "I'm afraid we're here to arrest you," Washington said. "You are charged with insider trading by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Will you come with us, please?" I stood up and followed them down the hallway and through a door into a room with a table and 4 chairs. They informed me of my rights and put on handcuffs. Really? I thought. They're going to march me through the airport in handcuffs for insider trading? It turned out that this was only half true. They let me take my jacket to hide the handcuffs from prying eyes. They took my iPad, transported me to their headquarters, and put me in another room with only 3 chairs. 30 minutes later, Agents Washington and Brown came in and sat down. They read out a list of charges. According to them, I was involved in a hacking scheme to obtain corporate press releases before they were published and was part of a group that made over $100 million from our activities. They wanted to ask me some questions. "Sorry, agents," I said. "I intend to remain silent and would like to speak with a lawyer." They tried to convince me that it would be in my best interest to answer their questions, but I stood my ground. These agents were not my friends, and I intended not to answer any of their questions. They took me to a table and allowed me to use the phone. I asked for a telephone directory because I didn't know any lawyers. They gave me the directory, and I looked through the impressive list. I didn't have the slightest idea who to choose, so I picked a beautiful ad at random. A man answered the phone, and I told him I needed a lawyer. He asked me about the nature of the matter, and I told him what was happening. He switched my call, and a woman answered. "Hello, this is Tyler Atkins," she said. "How can I help you, Mr. Kavanaugh?" I repeated my story, and she told me to be quiet and that she would be there in an hour. They brought me back to my room, and I calmed down. After 50 minutes, the door opened, and one of the most stunning women I have ever seen walked into the room. She must have been about 6 feet tall, with flaming red hair, the face of a model, and clear, creamy redhead skin. Her eyes were an icy blue, and her legs seemed endless in that skirt. Damn, she was great. She introduced herself and shook my hand. Her fingers were long, slender, and cool, and her handshake was firm. I guessed she was around 40, but it turned out I was mistaken by 7 years. She sat down in a chair and read the list of charges. She looked at me. "Mr. Kavanaugh, you have a big problem," she said. "Did you do it? Does it matter?" I asked. "For the purposes of my representation, no," she said. "For me personally, yes, it makes a big difference." "Well, I didn't do it," I told her. "I have never hacked a computer. I don't know how to do it. I have not participated in any schemes, and I have never received press releases before they were released publicly. I would not engage in any insider trading if I could, and I am completely innocent of these charges." She looked at me doubtfully, her eyes piercing my soul. "Okay," she said. "We will act on these allegations. If I find out later that you lied to me, it won't be nice, you know." "Great," I said. "Let's see how we can get you out of here. Is there someone you need to talk to?" "My wife," I said. "I'd like to talk to the kids too, but that can wait until I get out of here." "Let's see what I can do," she said. She left, and I didn't see anyone for 3 hours. I was about to pee on the floor when Agent Brown walked in with Miss Atkins. "I arranged bail for you," she said. You will have to surrender your passport, and you should know that all your bank accounts are frozen. How about my money? Will my credit cards work? I asked. She raised an eyebrow at Brown, who cleared his throat. They're frozen too, he said. You won't be able to use them. Will I get my wallet back? I asked. Yes, all your personal items will be returned, she said, except for your iPad. I'm afraid that one is now evidence, she said. Then the money is okay, and I'm ready to go. Well, as soon as Agent Brown points me to the toilet, I'll be ready, I said. They gave me an envelope with my things, and I went out with her. Come see me tomorrow at 10 in the morning, she said, handing me her business card and calling us a taxi. Want to use my phone to call my wife? She asked. I called home, but the answering machine picked up. I left a short message saying my trip was canceled and that I would be home in an hour. I then gave her the phone back. The taxi arrived, and I went home. When I arrived, no one was home, so I prepared something to eat. It was difficult to concentrate, but I managed. I needed to call the kids, find out where Kelly was, and figure out a few things. Daniel and Patricia weren't home either, so I left them messages asking them to call me back. After I ate, I called my boss, John Sinclair. He told me that I was fired and that my personal belongings were packed and sent home. I had lost my trader's license, and he was sure I would never work in the industry again. Moreover, he was looking forward to seeing me receive a long prison sentence. Well, that wasn't good. I was now unemployed and facing criminal charges. Kelly didn't come home that night, and when I called her, the phone went to voicemail. I didn't know if she heard my message or what she heard, but apparently, she left me. Now I was thinking about the children. What did they hear? If Kelly heard, I'm sure she told them. The next morning, I attended a meeting with Miss Atkins. She said that we had a lot of paperwork to do, and it wouldn't be quick. Mr. Kavanaugh, how are you going to pay for my services? She asked. If I am acquitted, it will not be a problem, I replied. It might be in your best interest for this to happen, she said, laughing. I liked hearing her laugh and decided that I would try to make her laugh more often. We have a big day ahead of us, she said. Let's start. What do you think happened, and how are you going to help me prove your innocence? I asked for a list of names of people involved in the case. She said they hadn't done a preliminary investigation yet, so she didn't really have any details. This would happen as soon as she could meet with the FBI and the SEC. I'm afraid I have no idea until I know exactly what happened, I told her. Once I have a clear idea, we will get to work. We discussed a few more issues, and I signed a mountain of paperwork. When we ran out of ink and free signature lines, I went home. I had a dozen messages on my answering machine, surprisingly from Kelly and the kids. They had problems, they were stuck in Boston, and their credit cards weren't working. Well, nothing surprising there. She had some money with her, but it wouldn't last long, and she needed my help. Strange, but the children were with her. Their messages were the same, but neither of them attempted to explain why they were in Boston. The situation was increasingly strange. I had only been home for 5 minutes when the phone rang. It was Kelly. Hi, Selden, she sounded upset. Listen, dear, I don't have much time. We're stuck at the airport, and I need my credit cards to work. Could you call the bank and find out what's wrong? I'm afraid it won't do any good, I replied. Kelly, I've been arrested and charged with insider trading. The cards you have won't work. Is there any way you could send me money? She asked. Approximately how much do you need? I asked. Just enough to buy tickets home, she said. I'll see what I can do, I replied. All our bank accounts are frozen. Okay, honey, she said. Please hurry. Thanks for the help. This was the weirdest conversation I've ever had. Again, there was no explanation as to why she and the children were in Boston. No questions about the arrest, nothing. She should have been shocked by every word I said, but there was nothing like that. Perhaps it was due to the lack of time she mentioned. I would answer all questions when she returned. Some time ago, I had rented a warehouse space. I went there and opened the safe in the cedar chest that my mother had left me. I took enough cash to last me until this was all over. I sent money for tickets to Kelly and the kids and drank whiskey to calm my nerves. I sat and thought until I went to sleep, then lay awake for a long time, thoughts spinning in my head. The next morning, I was woken up by the phone ringing. It was someone from Miss Atkins' office. She had conducted a preliminary investigation, and now all the information on the case was available. She invited a computer expert to discuss the information with us, and I was scheduled to show up at 10 a.m. I showered and got ready, then took a taxi to her office. Her computer expert turned out to be a very attractive young woman named Lainey. The trail was pretty cold, and while I'm not a computer expert myself, I do know my way around a computer. Between her and me, we were able to discover enough to start understanding what was going on. It turned out that most of the transactions were carried out when I was not at home. I was in another country on the day of several of the transactions, and I saw how Miss Atkins began to believe in me. "Mr. Kavanaugh, who knows your passwords?" she asked. "Kelly knows the password to my computer," I said. "The IT people at work know my work passwords, as do my bosses. They don't know the password for my home computer." "Does Kelly know your work passwords?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I don't give them to anyone, not even her." It was obvious that someone, presumably with Kelly's consent, was trying to set me up. But why? Where could Kelly get this information? I had press release files on my computer containing information that would be extremely valuable to investors, but the dates on the files were usually a week before the press releases. This meant that anyone with access to my computer could use this information to make trades before the public knew the news. Most press releases passed through the desk of my boss, John Sinclair, but his deals would be scrutinized. If he had made trades based on these press releases before they were published, he would have quickly been accused of insider trading. So, he apparently funneled information to Kelly so she could make trades without arousing suspicion. But why use my computer? Then I realized it was to set me up. John must have used my computer at work when I was away from my desk. When they showed up on routine checks, it triggered a search on my home computer, completing the setup. I met Kelly 2 years ago at a company party while accompanying my boss, John Sinclair. I was confused because John was married, and not to Kelly. John saw my confusion and immediately gave an explanation. His wife, Lucille, was not feeling well, so he asked Kelly, a family friend, to come to her place. I had no reason not to believe him, and Kelly seemed like a very charming woman. As the evening went on, she seemed to spend more time with me than with John. He even asked me if I would mind taking Kelly home so he could go back to Lucille, and I readily agreed. Kelly explained that she was divorced with 2 children, Daniel, 18, and Patricia, 16, who were spending the weekend with their father. We soon began to meet regularly. I was surprised that we rarely saw her children, and when we did, they were quite hostile toward me. After a whirlwind romance, I proposed to Kelly and was delighted when she accepted. But I was again surprised that Daniel and Patricia did not attend the wedding. "Oh, they're still upset about the divorce," Kelly said. This surprised me. We had been dating for almost a year, and I assumed she had been divorced long before that. I pushed it out of my thoughts for a while and enjoyed the wedding reception. When I got back to the bar, I went looking for Kelly and found her on the dance floor with John. They were dancing too closely for a bride and her guest, so I set down their drinks and walked over to intervene. They both hesitated for a moment, as if I was intruding, but they quickly separated. I took my bride in my arms and danced the next few dances with her. Back at our table, I mentioned to Kelly that she and John had walked too close to the line of what was acceptable for a bride at a wedding. Kelly laughed. "Oh, don't be stupid," she said. "John is just an old family friend. You have nothing to worry about." She made it seem so reasonable, but I noticed that Kelly and John were almost avoiding each other for the rest of the evening. We left the reception and went on our honeymoon. We settled into a more or less normal household routine. Daniel and Patricia were another matter. They didn't even try to act like we were in a relationship, and Kelly just shrugged. "I've finally accepted that this is the way it is and that hopefully it will improve over time," she said. A few weeks later, I came home from work to find Daniel and Patricia sitting in the living room. After receiving only a grunt from them in response to my greeting, I asked, "Is your mother at home?" Silence. I said, "Is your mom home?" I repeated. Daniel remained silent, but Patricia spoke up. "She's upstairs taking a shower," she said. I stood there for a minute, then decided that enough of this nonsense was enough. "Listen," I said, "you clearly don't like me very much, and I guess that's not uncommon in second marriages. But you seem to hate me, and if we're going to be any kind of family, you're going to have to put up with it." The silence continued. Then Patricia spoke. "We hate you," she said, "and always will, because you destroyed our family." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Your mother was already divorced when I met her," I said. "No," Daniel finally spoke. "She filed for divorce only 2 months after you started dating. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks before your wedding." I stood there dumbfounded. I literally had no words. "Guys, I'm sorry, but you have to believe me. Your mom told me she was divorced. I would never date a married woman." "Yet," Daniel said, "that's not what she said." "And who should we believe, our mother or the man who destroyed our family?" They both stood up and left the room, Patricia running out in tears. Well, I thought. I went upstairs to the master bathroom and pulled back the shower curtain. "Oh, Kelly," she laughed, "aren't you overdressed to join me?" "It's not funny, Kelly," I said, barely able to contain myself. "The kids just told me you were married when we started dating." "Of course, dear. I told you about this, but we were divorced." "You didn't say anything like that to me. You told me you were divorced." "I would never date a married woman, even if she was divorced." "Whatever. We are together now, and that's the main thing. So how about you take these things off and join me in washing my back and front?" I was still excited, but what could I say? I'm just a man, and I'm weak, and she's hot. I shed my clothes in record time and jumped into the shower. But the events of that day would stay with me for a long time. Often, when I had a free moment, I thought about what was happening, but usually, I didn't have time to dwell on it. Until one evening, when I was left alone at home for the whole evening. I sat in my office with a glass of wine in hand, and 2 thoughts became clear in my mind. One of the things some people I know have said when discussing guys who date women who cheat on their husbands is, if she cheats with you, she will cheat on you. While I didn't see any obvious signs of Kelly cheating, she had plenty of opportunities, like that night at the bachelorette party. Another thought was about her dancing with John at our wedding. At the time, it seemed more or less innocent, but now I wasn't so sure. Then I remembered how we met when she was at a party on John's arm because Lussel was sick. It was a stretch, but it was all I had at that moment. I decided to take the next day off from the office and called Lussel to see if we could meet for coffee. She was puzzled to say the least, but agreed, and we met at a local Starbucks. We exchanged a friendly hug and a kiss on the cheek, grabbed coffee, and sat down. I was stuck, not knowing how to start a conversation, but Lussel took the bull by the horns. "Okay, Selden," she said, "you asked for this meeting, so what's bothering you?" I took a deep breath and let it out. "Lussel," I began, "do you remember March 2 years ago when we had that job that you couldn't come to?" "Well," she said, "that's not entirely true. I could have come, but John told me it was for employees only, no spouses." That was a hammer blow between the eyes. "What happened, Selden?" she asked. "You look like your best friend died." "Perhaps you are not so far from the truth, Lussel. You know my wife, Kelly." "Of course, yes. I was at your wedding. Remember? She was a wonderful bride." Yes, she was." "Do you know how we met?" Lussel shook her head in denial. "She was at the same party. She was on John's arm. He told me she was there because you were sick. I think we both know now that he was lying." I didn't tell her about my suspicions that Kelly and John might have something else going on. I felt like a complete jerk for not telling her, but I didn't want her to confront him until I had all my cards stacked. I made a copy of Pagonia and cloned Kelly's phone, so I now had access to all her calls and texts. It didn't take me long to confirm their romance, but it was other things that made me shiver. "Hi John, it's Kelly. "Hey, baby." "What's the news?" said John. "Everything is set on my end. Selden thinks I'm going to a party with the girls, and I've got everything set up with Angela to cover for me. Can you get away from the old chain?" "No problem," he said. "I told her I was taking some clients from out of town for the evening and it would be very boring, just business." "I still can't believe how easy it was for me to lure you in." "Are you serious?" Kelly asked. "What normal man could resist you?" John said. "God knows you couldn't." If I hadn't already been in a state of bewilderment, the next part of their conversation certainly would have done so. "Did you make the trades I told you to make?" he asked. "Yes, of course," she said. "But I still don't understand why you want me to use Selden's computer." There was a pause. I could imagine him rolling his eyes. "Because when we make our move, we'll need a scapegoat to take the blame." "Selden?" she said. "Yes, Selden," he said. "He'll probably be able to get out of this if he's really lucky, but by the time they figure it out, we'll be long gone." "Have you told the kids yet?" "Not yet, but that shouldn't be a problem. They hate him for ruining our family. When I explain that we're taking his ill-gotten gains and going to live big on a Caribbean island, I don't think they'll be too upset." "Okay, but be careful. Kids can react strangely when they have to leave friends and stuff behind." "Don't worry, I can handle them." "Okay, it's your choice." "At the usual time and place?" "Yes." "Goodbye." "Goodbye, Kelly." I turned off the recording and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. Damn, what a confusing mess. As much as I suspected their affair, hearing it discussed so openly and coldly and learning that our relationship was a lie shook me to the core. I knew we hadn't known each other that long, but I loved her with all my heart and thought she felt the same about me. Now there was something bigger at play, something illegal that they were trying to frame me for. I didn't know what to do, but I definitely needed more information. If she was involved in such a scheme, she would have to hide the money somewhere, but where? I installed spyware on both my computers, home and work. Almost immediately, I hit the mark. John used early press releases for insider trades and had Kelly execute them from my home computer. Sometimes, he made trades from my work computer. I didn't understand why they used both computers. Perhaps it was to maximize the chances of me getting caught. I wasn't sure if that was their original intention, but it was obvious they were setting me up and using this as a distraction while they made off with their ill-gotten gains. Even more depressing was listening to her conversations with Daniel and Patricia. I knew they hated me because Kelly convinced them that I was to blame for the destruction of her marriage. Forget that, even if it was true, she was the one who cheated on their father. And as I now understand, she had already cheated on him with John. They were very excited when she told them that John had uncovered my insider trading scheme. "That's great," Daniel said. "We can turn him over to the police and get him out of our lives. Maybe you and Daddy can get back together?" "No, kids," she said. "I'm afraid that ship has already sailed. Besides, John and I have another plan. We're going to steal his loot and then let the police catch him. That means we'll have to leave the country for a while, but we will live on a beautiful island in the Caribbean. What about school and our friends? We'll figure something out. Don't worry, we'll have a lot of money. Maybe you can invite your friends on vacation, and once your stepfather is in jail, we can come back." I couldn't tell if the kids really believed it, but there were no more objections. Further tracking revealed that they were transferring funds to a Swiss bank account. Thanks to the spyware, I now had access to this account. I wasn't sure what exactly would happen, but I decided that I would need a ready source of cash. I started making irregular cash withdrawals from my checking and savings accounts, not large enough to attract attention and not always the same amounts. Once I had enough, I hid them in a safe I had in a storage room. I bought a new laptop. When I found out they were going to make their move, I logged into her account and transferred the money to another bank in Barbados. I kept transferring it until it ended up in a bank in the Cayman Islands. Right after I left for the airport, I knew that Kelly and the kids were heading to Bali. John stayed behind. They didn't say why, but I guessed it was to complete my setup. Meeting Kelly and the kids at the airport was another surreal experience. Kelly rushed over and put her arm around my neck, while Daniel and Patricia stood there with the strangest expressions on their faces. Since I spoke to her while she was stuck in Bali, she had never expressed surprise or concern about my legal problems. "Oh, Selden, she said. "Thank you very much." I didn't know what to do. I had no money, and the credit cards weren't working. "Yes, Kelly," I said. "I understand all this, but what were you doing in Bali? We didn't talk about any trips. And why didn't you have return tickets? After all, you probably bought round-trip tickets." "Oh, honey, let's not talk about it now. I just want to go home and relax." We all got into my car and headed home. "Okay, Kelly, I understand," I said. Little did she know how well I understood everything. We hadn't been home 15 minutes before she called John. "Oh, John," she cried. "It was terrible. I went to the bank just like you said, and there was no money." "What do you mean there wasn't?" "Exactly what I said. The account was closed and the money was transferred to a bank in Barbados. When I called the bank, they didn't tell me anything because I didn't have the right access codes." "You didn't do anything, did you, John?" "Of course not," he said. "Why would I do that?" "I don't know," she said. "But you better hope I don't find out you did it." She hung up. Things turned out even better than I had planned. I sowed the seeds of mistrust between them, which could only help my plans. Kelly came back into the room looking innocent and worried, even though I almost believed her. "So tell me, Selden," she said. "What is this story about the arrest and insider trading?" "I wish I knew, Kelly," I said. "I was at the airport waiting for a flight to Nassau when 2 FBI agents approached me and arrested me." "But for what?" "It looks like they found some early press releases on my computer with deals based on information from them. I have no idea why they checked my computer in the first place, let alone how the information ended up there." "You did it?" she asked. "What?" "Of course not, Kelly. You know me better." "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have asked. So how did the information end up on your computer?" "This is where things get interesting," I said. "Most of the computer activity happened while I was out of town." Kelly was a little taken aback by this, but quickly recovered. "So how do you think it ended up there?" "Well," I said, "that's the $64,000 question, isn't it?" "What do you mean?" "I think it's obvious. Do you have any idea how this could have happened?" "Of course not, Selden," she said. "Where would I get this kind of information, let alone know what to do with it?" "Okay, Kelly, I believe you," I said. "We'll just have to wait for the investigators to finish their work." "Yes, of course," she replied. I believe you only as much as I can throw at you." Her eyes darted nervously, and I could smell the fear. As I left the room, pulling my phone out of my pocket, I almost immediately received a signal that she was making a call. It did not surprise me that it was John Sinclair. John, she said as soon as he answered. "Selden knows." "I don't know how he knew, but he knows." "Calm down, Kelly," he said. "There's no way he could know anything. If he knew, he would have already called the police on us." "You're probably right," she said, "but something strange is happening." "And where did the money go?" "If you didn't take it and I didn't take it, then who?" "I wish I knew, Kelly. I wish I knew." My next meeting with Miss Atkins was quite interesting. She met with the prosecutors, and although they agreed that the evidence seemed to exonerate me, they still weren't sure I wasn't somehow involved. This was not entirely unreasonable, given that the trades were carried out on my computer. Things were further complicated by my growing attraction to Miss Atkins. I obviously thought she was beautiful at first sight, but as we worked together on my case, her pure intimacy overwhelmed my senses. She had the personality and intelligence to match. She gently rebuffed all of my attempts to go beyond a professional relationship, and when I persisted, she reminded me that I was her client and it was unethical for her to enter into a personal relationship with me. I tried to argue that this would only make her work harder for me, but she just laughed and shook her head. I didn't know how I would do it, but I was determined to win against this woman. Kelly was brought in for questioning, and I learned through the grapevine that she was still trying to pin the blame on me. Then she came to me in tears. Selden, please, you must know that I am innocent. I would never try to set you up. I love you. I barely had the strength not to laugh in her face. I know, Kelly. I know. Do not worry, everything will be fine. Is there some way that someone else could be on my computer? Was there someone in the house? I don't know if she cheated on me in her home, but I couldn't figure out why not. No, Selden, she said. Of course not. God, how I felt like a villain, but it was so right. She definitely deserved everything that happened to her. Maybe it was the children, they always hated me, blaming me for ruining your marriage. Kelly was so shocked that it took her several minutes to respond. This is absurd, Selden, she said. Even if they hate you as much as you say, where could they get such information? Well, if it wasn't them and no one else was here, then it had to be. Kelly covered her mouth and ran out of the room. The police continued to bring Kelly in for questioning, but they simply had no evidence other than that the transactions were made on my computer. There was no evidence that she made them. When investigators discovered that all the press releases had passed through John's desk, he was also called in for questioning. But he refused to answer questions. An anonymous call tipped them off to his relationship with Kelly, and a search of phone records confirmed it. Her one-way trip to Bice and bank records confirmed their fate. It didn't take them long to get Kelly to cooperate with John. Their trials were almost a formality. The evidence was overwhelming, with Kelly's admission to her role in the scheme. Kelly threw herself at my feet. Please, Selden, she said. You must believe me. I never wanted to do this. I was forced. Give me peace. Kelly, I said, I know everything. I know you cheated on your first husband with John, and you and John were together when you seduced me. I'm not sure if you planned to use me in your scheme from the very beginning, but that doesn't matter anymore. It's over, Kelly. And it looks like Daniel and Patricia will get their wish to be with their father, although not with you. I don't think you'll have a problem getting custody when their mother is a convicted felon. Kelly simply burst into tears when the bailiffs came to take her away. Since neither she nor John were willing or able to return the money, they were not eligible for a reduced sentence. She will have to serve 5 years, and John will have to serve 10. The children never wanted to talk to me before leaving with their father. They still blamed me for the destruction of their family, and I think they blamed me for Kelly's arrest as well. Tyler was able to get my arrest annulled and my trader's license reinstated. Even though I had no intention of returning to my old company, Tyler invited me out for drinks to celebrate our victory, and I was only too happy to accept. After our drinks were served, I got right down to business. So, are we done? Case closed? Yes, she said. You are free. Great, I said. You're fired. She almost choked on her drink. What? Why? Well, you told me about some ethical rules about dating clients. Yes, I have such rules, but I don't understand how. Suddenly, a spark of understanding lit up in her eyes. I must be the stupidest woman on the planet, she said, especially for a lawyer. I just didn't realize it until now. Now that you've figured it out, what do you think? Do we have a chance? There's always a chance, I said. I just honestly didn't think of you that way, she replied. I feel the same, I said. But we did not meet under other circumstances. We met as attorney and client, and you were accused of a serious crime. But I was innocent, I protested. I don't want to get into the legal stuff, she said. The police decided they didn't have enough evidence to pursue charges against you. Plus, they had more evidence against John and Kelly. It's not quite the same as being innocent. To quote Dickens, the law is in 5th place. I smiled as Tyler laughed her charming laugh. This isn't the first time I've heard this, and I'm not saying it's not true, but that's the way it is. You still haven't answered my question. Will you go on a date with me? You're persistent, she said. Okay, I'll go with you, but I'll tell you in advance that things won't go any further until we've had some very serious conversations. My inner censor tells me that you still haven't told me the whole story, and I'll get it out of you one way or another. My ears perked up at this. What did she know or think she knew? You may well try, I said. I'm sure you can be very persuasive." She just gave me a knowing smile and a wink as we agreed to dinner on Friday and parted with a warm handshake and a kiss on the cheek. When Friday evening arrived and we had dinner, the conversation was pleasant, but there was tension throughout the evening. Tyler had her suspicions about me, and I was worried about hers. I received a much warmer kiss goodbye, but that was all. Our second and third dates were more passionate, but there was still a barrier between us. I was torn. I knew I was in love with Tyler, and I believed she loved me too, but she couldn't give herself completely to me while I hid part of myself from her. I was afraid that if I opened up to her, I might lose her. We continued to meet regularly, but there was always an elephant in the room. In our conversations, sometimes I felt like I was being cross-examined. This seriously complicated our relationship. Tyler refused to deepen it because she wasn't sure of me and believed that trust was critical to any relationship. Given my experience with Kelly, I could understand her concerns, but I could never muster the strength to fully open up to her. It all came to a head as we made out on her couch. Things were about to get very hot when she slammed on the brakes for the umpteenth time. But this time, everything was different. "Selden," she said, "I can't go on like this." "What, do you want to break up with me?" I don't want this, Selden. I'm really falling in love with you, but I just can't be with someone I can't trust." "Why? What did I do to make you not trust me?" "Come on, Selden," she said. "You can't be that naive. You clearly know more about your business than you've told anyone." This anonymous call was too convenient, not to mention the missing money. I found myself between a rock and a hard place. If I don't confess, our relationship will probably end, but if I tell her everything, we might still break up, and I don't know what kind of legal trouble I might get into. I took a deep breath and decided to tell her the truth. One thing was for sure, I didn't want to lose her, and that was my only hope. "Okay, Tyler, I'll tell you everything and hope and pray that you'll want to be with me." Tyler looked a little shocked, probably thinking I was going to tell her. She then nodded for me to continue. I told her how we met, the children's reactions to our marriage, and finally, my conversation with Lucille that revealed John and Kelly's lies. I then told her about the phone cloning, confirming the scam, and how I found out about their insider trading scheme. I didn't even have to tell her about moving the money and making the call, it was obvious to her. I bowed my head, putting my face in my hands, completely exhausted and not knowing if these would be my last moments here. When I looked up, Tyler was very calm. She seemed lost in thought. "I can't say I didn't suspect something like this," she said, "but it's still a little shocking to hear it straight from you." I nodded in understanding. "I hear you," I said. "But what about us now?" "I can't say right now. I need time to digest all this. I think you should go now. I'll call you when I'm ready." I hesitated for a moment but realized that my best hope was to respect her wishes. I stood up, kissed the top of her head, and left. The next few days were the worst of my life. I both longed for and dreaded her call. I also wondered if the police would come to my home. The following Friday, the phone rang. Tyler's name was on the display. I answered the phone nervously. "Hey, Tyler," I said anxiously. "Hey, Selden. I've made some decisions. Can you come over for dinner tonight around 7? Then we can talk." "Sure, Tyler. Whatever you say." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up feeling somewhat relieved that she wanted to talk and didn't just tell me to disappear. I rang her doorbell, and she greeted me with a sweet kiss on the lips before I followed her into the kitchen. I didn't know how much appetite I'd have or if I'd be able to hold down food, but I went to the refrigerator for a can of Pepsi and sat down at the table when she shooed me away from the stove. We had a pleasant dinner with casual conversation. Luckily, it was a very light meal. I don't think I could handle anything heavy. After dinner, she let me help with the dishes. Then we went into the living room and sat on opposite ends of the couch. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I didn't want to rush her, and she obviously needed time to collect her thoughts. "Selden," she began, "I can't say I'm not disappointed that you didn't tell me all this when I took your case. I was your lawyer, you could and should have trusted me. I'm also offended that you continued to hide it when we started dating. But having said that, I sympathize with your feelings of betrayal that have made it difficult for you to open up, even to me. I also appreciate that you eventually confessed, even if I had to push you a little." She smiled at me slightly. Ultimately, my decision was quite simple. I love you, Selden, and I know that you love me. I have one condition before we continue our relationship. I hope I'm not sticking my neck out too far, but I'll do anything for you, Tyler, I said. I thought you would say that. Don't worry, I don't think you'll have a problem with it. So, what is it? I asked, the tension palpable. It's money, Selden. I don't feel comfortable holding this money. What can we do about it? There are many ways to find out who it really belongs to, I said. Actually, this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I think I've found the answer. What is it? Tyler asked. Money certainly doesn't do any good where it is now, I said. That was an interesting choice of words, Selden, she replied, because I was thinking about doing something good with it. Do you have anything specific in mind? I'm open to almost anything you want to do. As you know, both my parents died of cancer. I'd like to donate it to cancer research. That's a great idea, Tyler. I will begin making the necessary arrangements tomorrow morning. Tyler came over to me, sat on my lap, and kissed me deeply. I began to seriously hope that everything would be fine. So, where do we go from here? I asked. I suggest you take me to bed, she said. I was stunned. Get your thoughts out of the ditch, Selden. I just want to fall asleep in your arms. Oh, sure, I mumbled as she laughed at my reaction. We went upstairs, and she let me use the bathroom first, giving me a spare toothbrush. I used the toilet, washed my face, brushed my teeth, and was done in 10 minutes. When she came out of the bathroom, I was already lying in bed, wrapped in sheets. I just lay there with my hands behind my head, amazed at how my life had changed. Tyler soon emerged from the bathroom dressed in a skimpy nightgown. I couldn't even tell if there was anything underneath it. She climbed into bed and snuggled up to my side, placing her head on my chest and her hand on my stomach. I hugged her, pulled her closer, and kissed her forehead. I love you so much, Tyler, I said. I still can't believe you could love me, she replied. You better believe it. I wouldn't have gone through all this if I hadn't been in love, she said. She turned off the light, and although it was still early, we soon fell asleep. The next day, I began transferring money back from the Cayman Islands and making anonymous donations to various cancer research and treatment organizations. Each donation was large enough to be appreciated and useful, but not so large that it attracted unwanted attention. There was one last piece left in the puzzle that had been my life for the past couple of years. Tyler and I were sitting in the living room having our afternoon drinks when there was a gentle knock on the front door. I stood up to answer and was shocked to see Daniel and Patricia standing there, looking very nervous. Can I come in? Daniel asked. Of course, I said, puzzled. I motioned for them to come in and close the door. They followed me into the living room, and Tyler stood up. Tyler, these are my adopted children, Daniel and Patricia, I said. Startled, Tyler shook their hands. Please, she said, take a seat. Can I get you a drink? Daniel looked at Patricia, who shook her head no. I don't think we'll stay that long, he said. Okay, I said. Why are you here? We came to apologize, Daniel said. Apologize for what? I asked, my surprise evident. Patricia continued, we visited our mother yesterday. She said, I'm sure it's been hard for you, but what does that have to do with me? She told us the truth about your relationship, Daniel said. She told us that she was divorced. It was more than that, Patricia added. She also admitted that she had already cheated on her father with John Sinclair. Well, I said, I really appreciate you coming to tell me this. I'm sure this whole situation has been very difficult for you. They both nodded. Can I ask you something? I said. They looked at me and nodded. I understand your feelings towards me, especially considering what you were told. But even if it were true, your mother was not without guilt. Were you old enough to choose? Why did you stay with her and not with your father? I asked. Daniel just smiled sadly. These were more of her lies, he said. She tried to blame the scam on him. He worked too many hours, traveled a lot, and neglected her, the usual excuses. She conveniently left out the fact that she was a housewife with expensive tastes, and he had to work hard to support her lifestyle. I just shook my head as they stood up to leave. I shook hands with Daniel and briefly hugged Patricia. I have to say again that I appreciate you telling me all of this. It shows real character. If I ever need anything. Thank you, but that's really not necessary, Daniel said. Our father is in control. We have a lot of work to do to repair our relationship, but I think we will succeed. I walked them to the door, then sat back down with Tyler. Ugh, I said. That was really unexpected. Yeah, Tyler said. They seem like good kids. Yeah, I said. It's like bad news and good news. The bad news is that Kelly ruined our marriage and my relationship with my two good kids. And the good news? The good news is that it led me to you, I said, pushing her gently and kissing her passionately. Our tongues immediately intertwined in a duel. Before we got too far, Tyler stood up, pulling me with her. I think it would be more convenient somewhere else, she said, leading me to the bedroom. Not being a fool, I wasted no time following her. What do you think of our short story? I thought my husband did the absolute right thing by recording the conversation on his phone.
Let's continue.
I don't remember what made me wake up at that moment. It was around 3 in the morning, and rain was lashing against the window. The air was heavy with the smell of dampness mixed with smoke from the fireplace. I sat in my old house, as if cut off from the world, as usual, TR to hide from reality. My life had long since lost its balance. After I left the police force, I thought I could live out the rest of my days in peace. But the past, as it often does, refuses to let go. That night, I flinched a vague sense of danger. Perhaps it was a premonition, or maybe it was something real creeping toward me in the darkness. The creak of the old wooden floor made me freeze. At first, I thought it was the rats I had meaning to get rid of for ages. But the sound came again. This time, it was closer. Someone was walking down the hallway. I quickly turned off the lamp on my desk, leaving the room in complete darkness. My heart pounded like a hammer. If it were a neighbor or someone who wandered in by accident, they would have called out to me, I thought. But the silence was absolute. I reached for the old revolver I kept in my desk drawer. In moments like these, I was grateful for my habit of holding on to the past, no matter how useless it might seem. When the footsteps stopped, I opened the door to my bedroom. The house seemed empty, but I knew someone was there. And they weren't here by chance. In the next second, I felt a faint draft of air behind me. Someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, but all I managed to catch was a fleeting shadow. The blow hit me in the sid sharp, hard, and clearly aimed to knock me off my feet. I lost my balance but managed to GR onto the doorframe. The revolver flew out of my hand and hit the floor with a dull, don't even think about it. A low, hoarse voice sounded behind me. His accent was strange, as if he was trying to speak without one, though it was clear his native tongue was something else. Who the hell are you? I exhaled, trying to buy time. Instead of answering, I felt a steel loop tighten around my neck. A second intruder expertly slipped a garrote over me. This wasn't the first time I'd encountered such methods. Far too professional for simple burglars. They shoved me forward, pinning me against the wall. I couldn't make out their faces, but it didn't matter. Their purpose was clear. Who sent you? I growled, trying to keep my voice steady. Your loving wife. One of them rumbled with a hint of mockery. Looks like she's tired of having you around. And of your insurance. My wife? I couldn't believe my ears. Elsa, my partner of nearly 20 years, had ordered my death? My mind filled with memories. Our trips together, evenings by the fireplace, quiet tea about the future. Now that future had turned into a noose around my neck. You're overthinking it, buddy, one of them said. Relax. It'll be over soon. But if they thought I'd let them finish the job so easily, they were dead wrong, gritting my teeth. I threw my head back sharply, striking one of them. The garrote loosened, and I managed to gasp for air. The second intruder immediately went for a knife, but I kicked him hard in the stomach. He staggered, but didn't fall. The first one, cursing, clutched his head, but he was ready to attack again. I grabbed a chair from the wall and hurled it at the first man. He dropped the knife, and without hesitation, I picked it up. "Tell your client she made a huge mistake," I growled, pointing the blade at both of them. They exchanged glances. Mercenaries are rarely cowards, but these two clearly hadn't expected their target to be so prepared. "Think you can stop us?" said the taller one. "We're not the first, and we won't be the last. I'll keep that in mind," I replied, taking a step forward. For a moment, the room was still. They clearly didn't want to die here and now, and I hoped that would give me a chance to survive. One of them, likely the leader, raised his hands in a calming gesture, but his eyes stayed fixed the knife in my hand. "Listen, man, don't do anything stupid. We got nothing personal against you. We're just doing a job. And you, I assume, want to live, right?" I took another step forward, forcing them toward the wall. The knife trembled slightly in my hand, but I tried to appear fully in control. "Want to make a deal?" I sneered. "Then tell me everything. Who hired you, how much they paid, and what else you know. Maybe I'll let you walk out of here." The second mercenary, the bulkier one, snorted. "You're naive. Think we're that talkative? This is business, buddy. And I think I can make it very short." I cut him off, raising the knife a little higher. "Talk, or one you doesn't leave this place." Silence fell. They exchanged quick glances. The leader finally spoke, his voice steady, like professional used to slipping out of tight spots. "Fine, but just a little. The rest, you'll figure out on your own. Your wife paid us in advance. Keep it clean. She gave us instructions and left town for a couple of days to have an alibi. We were supposed to finish the job by morning, leaving a few traces to make it look like a robbery." "How much?" I asked. 50,000, half up front, the rest after your disappearance." I let out a short laugh, feeling anger boiling inside me. She had valued my life so cheaply that stung more than the betrayal itself. "So, she's eager to collect the insurance, huh?" I said, narrowing my eyes. "Yeah," he admitted. "You weren't supposed to be home. She said you were heading into town to see your brother, or wherever you usually go." My grip on the knife tightened. "Here's what you're going to do," I said quietly, but with menace. "You're going to leave my house and deliver a message to her. I'm still alive. And now she's my target." "You're insane," the second man muttered. "She'll outplay you. You know how this works." I leaned in closer, so my words were unmistakably clear. "Then let her try. But I'm not the man she once knew." They slowly backed toward the door, their eyes never leaving the knife in my hand. As soon as they disappeared beyond the threshold, I sank into a chair, feeling cold sweat run down my back. Elsa, my wife, my best friend, my family. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had wanted to erase my existence. But now I knew the truth. And she, it seemed, didn't realize I'd start hunting back. A plan was already forming in my mind. I would dig up every contact, every connection I had ever made. If she wanted me dead, she would soon understand the gravity of her mistake. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the fireplace, contemplating my next steps. The FL danced before me, but there was no warmth, no comfort within me. I replayed every moment that might have hinted at Elsa's betrayal. Sudden trips, phone calls she would end when I entered the room, subtle but alarming changes in her behavior. Now it all fell into place. She had been planning this for a long time. By morning, I had made my decision. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't let her win. On the contrary, I would show her she had underestimated the wrong man. First, I retrieved a box from an old cabinet I hadn't opened in 10 years. It was my insurance from my former life. Inside were records, contacts, and a few items useful for self-defense. A small pistol with a silencer, a pack of ammunition, and several fake IDs. I had once promised myself never to use these things again, but Elsa had left me no choice. Picking up the phone, I dialed the number of an old associate I hadn't spoken to in years. "Joe." I knew he was still in the game. "Yeah?" His deep, confident voice answered, "It's me." "I need help," I said, wasting no time on pleasantries. Joe chuckled. "Thought you retired, buddy. What's going on?" "Someone tried to kill me. My wife hired mercenaries. I need you to find out everything you see about her and the people she's working with." "Mercenaries?" Damn, Michael, are you in some kind of movie? He paused and added, all right, I'll look into it. But it's going to cost you. Money's not an issue, I shot back. Let me know as soon as you find anything. I hung up and scanned the room. Everything around me felt alien, as if the house was no longer mine. Maybe it never was, but that didn't matter now. A couple of hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Joe. I've got something, he started without preamble. Your wife's been moving large sums to an offshore account over the past few months. She's also got a lawyer who seems to know more than he should. Looks like he's covering for her. Name's Raymond Black. And Michael. What? I asked, feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. She's not going to stop. If you survived last night, she'll hire someone else. You're in serious danger. I know, I replied. But now, the danger is hers. I hung up and began to prepare. No sabemos, no panique. I had one rule: act with cold precision. The first step was finding the lawyer's address. If Raymond Black was her right-hand man, would be my first target by the time I left the house. The sun was rising. The city was waking up, people rushing to work, oblivious to the deadly game unfolding among them. At that moment, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just survive. I would dismantle her plan piece by piece and make her regret every move she had made. I arrived at the lawyer's office around noon. It was an unremarkable building downtown, but look was enough to tell me that something important was hidden behind its ordinary facade. I took out my pistol, checked it, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The interior of Raymond Black's office was as cold and impersonal as the man who wore there. White walls, a couple of dull paintings, a glass desk with a perfectly stacked pile of documents. A young secretary behind the desk glanced at me, her expression professionally polite but cautious. Do you have an appointment? She asked with a forced smile. No, but Raymond will want to see me, I said, striding past her toward the door with his name on it. She began to protest, but I had already pushed the door open and walked in. Raymond Black was seated behind his desk, holding a Mont Blanc pen that he clearly thought symbolized his authority. He looked up, and his face showed a mix of surprise and irritation. Who are you, and why are you in my office uninvited? He said cold. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it, and looked him straight in the eye. You know who I am, I said calmly, but with an unmistakable threat in my voice. You work for Elsa, and I'm the man she's trying to get rid of. For a moment, his face remained expressionless, but a slight tremor in his fingers betrayed unease. I have no idea what you're talking about, he said, leaning back in his chair. You're making a big mistake. I'm just a lawyer. Really? I took a step forward. Then maybe you can explain why your client transferred hundreds of thousands to an offshore account before hiring a couple of hitmen to take out H-husband? Raymond squinted, tilting his head slightly. He was clearly weighing whether to keep lying or go on the offensive. If you have evidence, present it, he said, attempting to sound confident. I took another step, slower this time. Now I stood at the edge of his desk. I don't have time for your games, Raymond. I know you're on it. Either you tell me what she's planning next, or I'll make you talk. I placed the pistol on the desk, not pointing it at him, but making it unmistakably visible. His eyes widened, but he quickly composed himself. You're threatening a lawyer? He asked with a strained smile. That's illegal. So is murder, I replied. But that doesn't stop your client from trying to send me to the grave. Silence hung in the air. Raymond pressed his lips together, clearly weighing his odds. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. Listen, I'm just doing my job. She said you were causing problems, that you might be dangerous. I didn't know all the details. My role was to prepare documents to make her alibi airtight. What kind of documents? I demanded sharply. A will, he admitted. It's drafted to make it look like you left everything to her and the kids. She wanted it to seem clean, so no one would dig too deep. I felt anger boil within me again. They had truly planned to erase me from their lives, as if I were just a problem to be solved. Where's the will? I barked. In the safe, he whispered, nodding toward a cabinet in the corner. Open it, now. Raymond stood up and, visibly nervous, walked to the cabinet. His hands trembled slightly as he entered the code. I kept the pistol ready, watching his every move intently. When the safe opened, he pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside, there was indeed a will stating that, upon my death, all my assets would go to Elsa. Good, I said, tucking the folder away. Now listen carefully. You're going to your client and telling her that you couldn't convince me, that I know everything, and that I'm coming for her. This is madness. He hissed. No, I said, pointing the gun at his chest. Madness is trying to kill me. Now, get out before I change my mind. Raymond bolted from the office, nearly knocking over his secretary. I stood there, staring at safe. This was only the first step, but now I knew I had the foundation to fight back. And I'm ready to go all the way. A glimpse into the past. My name is Michael Lawson, and I'm 52 years old. My life wasn't always like this. Once had a family, stability, and what I thought was a future that nothing could destroy. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. My father, a World War II veteran, was a strict but fair man. He worked as an engineer at the local factory, while my mother took care of the home. She was the heart of our family, warm, loving, and always supportive. My younger brother, James, was the polar opposite of me, carefree, reckless, and drawn to risks. He left home early, and our paths diverged. In my youth, I was always focused. After high school, I joined the police academy because I wanted to protect others and make the world a better place. Starting as a patrol officer, I quick rose through the ranks and joined the homicide division. It was there that I realized the world was far from what I had imagined. The cruelty, deceit, and betrayals of people became part of my daily life. But I was good at my job, one of the best. I met my future wife, Elsa, at my brother's graduation party. She was the kind of woman you dream about, intelligent, charming, with a smile that could brighten the darkest night. We got married a year after we met, and I believed that with her, I could face any challenge. Our children became the center of my world. Our eldest son, Jason, was born 3 years after our wedding. He was an energetic, curious boy who constantly asked questions about the world. I was proud of him from the very beginning. Later, our daughter Lily was born, a mirror image of her mother, just as beautiful and intelligent. Lily was always more serene and thoughtful. She loved to draw and dreamed of becoming an architect. Elsa and I worked hard to build the perfect home for our children. I worked long hours to secure their future. By the time Jason entered high school, I had left the police force. I was offered position as a consultant at a major private security company, which allowed me to spend more time with my family. But the perfect life started to fall apart about 5 years ago. After 20 years of marriage, Elle began to change. At first, it was subtle. She talked less with me, spent more time on her phone, then came the frequent trips, new friends I had never met. But I turned a blind eye to it all. I was convinced it was just a midlife crisis. She always came home, always stayed with the kids. Or so I thought. Jason graduated from college and is now a doctor. He rarely visits, too busy with his career. Lily got married and moved to another state. She calls me occasionally, but I feel a wall has grown between us. It hurts, but I understand she's an adult now, with her own life. Elsa, on the other hand, seemed content with the empty house. I tried to reconnect with her, suggesting trips, new hobbies, but nothing changed. She had become a stranger. Looking back now, I see that I missed the signs. Elsa was no longer the woman I married. She had changed, as had everything around us. And I, perhaps, clung too long to the illusion that our family still existed. And now, knowing that she hired people to kill me, I'm starting to see the truth. Everything I thought was real was a lie. My wife didn't care about me. She wanted me dead, for the money, for freedom, for a life without me. But she made a mistake. I'm still here. And now, my mission is to dismantle her plan piece by piece until she realizes she's dealing with a man who doesn't give up. After much reflection, I understood that my life wasn't just a series of mistakes, but also a child decisions that made me who I am. Thinking about my children, I couldn't shake the guilt. Maybe I spent too much time working instead of being there for them. When Jason dreamed of becoming a doctor, I barely supported him. I thought medicine wasn't for our family. But he persisted, and now I'm prouder of him than words can express. Lily was always a daddy's girl. She loved sitting on my lap, watching me read, and asking countless questions about the world. Her passion for architecture started when I once showed her an old drafting board I found in my father's attic. As a child, she would say, "Daddy, I'll build the most beautiful house for you and Mom." Now, she lives hundreds of miles away and calls less and less. Elsa, her image once warmed my soul, but now it only brings bitterness. She was always in control. Her charisma could convince anyone that her way was the only way. But I never thought she would turn that energy against me. I trusted her. Perhaps too much. I brewed a strong coffee, trying to clear my thoughts. I had a choice. Wait for her to strike Aga or act first. The latter option suited me more. I had spent too many years in the police force sit idly by. My first target was clear, Raymond Black. He knew too much, and even though I let him go, was certain he was already reporting our conversation to Elsa. She would be preparing. I pulled out a notebook from the drawer where I kept emergency contacts. One of the numbers belonged to Dan Harris, my old partner. After retiring, he had opened a private detective agency and had connections practically everywhere. "Mike?" He answered in a surprised voice when I called. "It's been ages. What's going on?" "I've got trouble, Dan," I said, feeling my voice grow heavier. "I need your help. Someone's trying to kill me." "Damn. Are you sure?" "More than sure. My wife's involved. She hired people to take me out." Silence hung on the other end of the line. "You know, I've seen a lot in my life, but this..." He finally murmured. "All right, what do you need?" "I need intel on her movements, addresses, accounts, meetings. Everything you can dig up. I have to know what she's planning." "That will take a couple of days," he said, "but I'll get it done. And Mike, be careful." "Thanks, Dan." I hung up and glanced at the clock. I had some time while Dan gathered the information. Crossing my arms, I thought about my next move. She was smart, but I knew how she thought. I'd lived with her too long not to learn her patterns. She wouldn't stop until she thought I was broken or dead. But that wasn't going to happen. I opened a closet and pulled out an old, battered suitcase containing relics from my past life. A faint smirk tugged at the corners of my lips as I spotted my police badge, something I once wore with pride. Back then, I was part of the system, part of the law. Now I was taking matters into my own hands. But this time, I'd play by my own rules. The next step was finding her weak spot. She always cared about her image, was a perfectionist, everything had to look flawless. If I could find a way to destroy that facade, she'd lose con. "All right, Elsa," I muttered, closing the suitcase. "Let's see who comes out on top." At that moment, I realized, in this game, I wasn't just a target anymore. I was the hunter now. Time crawled, but I knew I had to act cautiously. Rash decisions could cost me my life. Elsa, for all her betrayal, was cunning and calculated. She hadn't just sent mercenaries. She had planned every step, banking on my weakness. While waiting for Dan's intel, I delved into the details of her world that I'd once overlooked. I opened an old photo album filled with snapshots of happier times. There was Elsa laughing at picnic, holding newborn Jason, celebrating Lily's first birthday. It all looked so real, but now though images felt like an illusion. I remembered her last words before the mercenaries stormed into my house. "Don't forget to lock the door, darling." They sounded like a taunt. Her confidence, her calm demeanor, all of it had been a mask hiding a predator. My phone vibrated, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Dan. "Mike, I've got something," he began without preamble. "Your wife recently rented an apartment across town. Address is on its way to you. Also, her accounts have been unusually active in the past few weeks. She moved a significant sum to a new Swiss bank account. She's preparing to disappear." I said, processing the information. "Looks that way. But there's more," Dan added, hesitation creeping into his voice. "She's been meeting with a man. I checked him out, and he's not from her usual circle. Likely a middleman or organizer." "You have a name?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter. "Richard Dane. He works for a big-time lawyer." "Guess who?" "Raymond Black." I clenched my fist, feeling anger start to boil. Everything was falling into place. Elsa had been orchestrating this plan with surgical precision, leveraging connections and money to erase me from her life. "Thanks, Dan. Send me the apartment address too," I said. "I'll handle the rest. Mike, don't do anything stupid. These people are dangerous. Trust me, I know how to deal with them." I ended the call, and looked at the address Dan had sent. The apartment was in a high-rise on the outskirts of the city, a quiet neighborhood where no one asked questions. The perfect spot for someone who wanted to stay under the radar. Gathering what I needed, my gun, fake IDs, and some cash, I headed to the car. The drive took about 40 minutes. Gray clouds loomed overhead, mirroring my mood. I parked near the building, a typical modern residential complex. No cameras at the entrance, no security. Another sign this place was chosen deliberately. Reaching the floor, I stopped outside the apartment door. No sounds from inside. I knocked cautiously. No answer. Taking out the lockpicks I hadn't used since my police days, I worked the lock. Within a minute, the door gave way. The apartment was empty. At first glance, it looked ordinary. A few boxes, a couple of suitcase expensive furniture. But on the table, I spotted a stack of papers. Moving closer, I realized there were documents for offshore accounts, fake passports, and my obituary. For a moment, everything inside me froze. She hadn't just planned to kill me. She had already started crafting the official narrative of my day. I heard footsteps. Someone was approaching the door. Seconds stretched into eternity. Pressing myself against the wall, I prepared for the unexpected. The door opened, and a man stepped in. I recognized him instantly, Richard Dane. He didn't even have time to take in his surroundings before I stepped out of the shadows, gun aimed at his chest. "Hello, Richard," I said quietly. "Let's talk." Richard froze, unmoving. His eyes widened for a split second, but he quickly regained composure. Clearly, he was a man accustomed to dangerous situations. But this time, he hadn't expected to find himself as the "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly despite his attempt to appear confident. "You know who I am," I replied calmly, my voice carrying an edge of steel. "You work for my wife. That means you know what she's planning. Now I want to hear everything. No lies, no evasion. If you try to lie, it'll be the last mistake you ever make." Richard swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the gun before returning to me. "Look, I'm just a middleman," he began. "I don't know all the details." She approached me through Black, said she needed help with a complicated situation. "Help with murdering her husband?" I interrupted. "Tell me you didn't know what you were signing up for." "No, I knew," he admitted, averting his gaze. "But I'm not the one who carries it out. My job is to organize, to connect the right people, arrange the paperwork, make everything look clean. Nothing personal." I stepped closer, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Nothing personal?" I repeated with a cold smile. "You helped destroy a man's life, and it's nothing personal? Do you know how long it took me to realize my wife wanted me dead? How many years I spent thinking I knew her? And now you're telling me it's nothing personal?" He fell silent, lowering his head. "You've got two choices, Richard," I continued, tightening my grip on the gun. "Either you tell me everything you know, and you might walk out of here alive, or I drag you out myself, and you'll never be seen again." Richard seemed to grasp that he had no other option. He sighed heavily and began to speak. "She planned everything in advance. First, the will to claim all your assets. Then, through Black, she contacted me to arrange your removal. The mercenaries were just the first step. If TH failed, she had a backup plan. She was going to stage an accident, a car crash, or a fatal robbery." My heart clenched. She didn't just want me gone. She was willing to do whatever it took. "Where is she now?" I asked, my gaze fixed on high. "I don't know for sure," he said quickly. "But she's meeting with Black tonight. They arranged it at his office." I nodded. That made sense. Black was her main accomplice, and this apartment was just a temporary hideout. But now I knew where to find the "All right, Richard," I said, stepping back. "You're going first, what?" He paled. No, I can't. If they find out," I said, "anything, then pray I don't decide to end you right here," I replied. "You're coming with me. You'll take me to Black. And if anything goes wrong, you'll be the first to pay the price." He closed his eyes, as if cursing his fate, and slowly nodded. "All right," he exhaled. "I'll take you." We left the apartment. In my mind, I had a clear plan. Catch Elsa and her lawyer off guard. S might be smart, but she'd made a mistake. She underestimated me. And now, I intended to use that to my advantage. We exited the building and headed toward his car. It was a gray sedan, nondescript and blending in with any other car on the street. Mercenaries, elaborate plans, lawyers. It all made me feel like the protagonist of a cheap thriller. But this was my reality, and now I was playing by my own rules. Richard got behind the wheel, nervously glancing at me as though expecting I might change my mind and get rid of him right then and there. But I had no intention of doing that, not while he was still useful. The address of Black's office, I said as I settled into the passenger seat. And don't even think trying anything. Got it, he mumbled, starting the engine. We drove in silence. Only the sound of rain tapping against the car roof broke the oppressive atmosphere. I stared out the window, contemplating what lay ahead. Elsa clearly hadn't expected me to survive the mercenaries' attack. Now her plans might shift. The question was, how quickly could she adapt? We're almost there, Richard muttered, his eyes fixed on the ROA. I nodded. We pulled up to a tall office building in the city center. The windows were dark EXE for one on the top floor, glowing with soft, warm light. That was Black's office. ARU adrenaline coursed through me, a turbulent mix of anger, determination, and a strange sense of loss. You're coming with me, I said, stepping out of the car and scanning the street. Listen, Richard started, but I raised my hand to cut him. Of this isn't up for discussion. You're going in with me, so I know you're not lying. And if you even think about warning them, I pulled out my gun and pointed it at him. You know what'll happen. Richard nodded, turning even paler. We entered the building. Inside, it was quiet, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty lobby. The elevator took us to the top floor, and I felt tension in the air tighten. Richard was trembling like a leaf, but remained silent. When the elevator doors opened, we found ourselves in a long hallway with a single door at the end. Light shone through the gap beneath it, as if inviting us in. I gestured for Richard to go for his knock. I ordered. He knocked nervously. From inside, Black's voice called out, "Come in." The door opened, and we stepped inside. Black was seated at his desk, bent over some papers. When he looked up and saw me, his face instantly turned ashen. "Lawson?" His voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" "You know why I'm here, Black," I said, stepping in and closing the door behind me. "Where's Elsa?" "Elsa?" He tried to feign surprise, but it didn't land. "I have no idea what you're—" I aimed the gun at his desk. "Don't test me." "Where is she?" Black hesitated, a flicker of fear flashing in his eyes. Finally, he stammered, "She was here about an hour ago. We were discussing her plans. But she left." "Where?" "I don't know. Honestly. She said she was going home to make sure she hadn't left any traces. She panicked when she heard you were still alive." I stepped closer. "You're lying. If you want to walk out of here alive, tell me the truth. Where is she?" "All right," he yelled, raising his hands. "She went to the country house to wait until things settled down. Richard has the address." "That's all I know." I turned to Richard, who frantically fumbled with his phone. Here. He showed me the address. "That's all I know." I glanced at the screen, committing the address to memory. A country house. A quiet, secluded place where no one would disturb her. It was her fallback plan, her refuge. But now I knew where to find you. "Thank you," I said coldly, lowering the gun. "You both stay here. If I find out you tried to wah her, the consequences will be unpleasant." I turned and left the office. Outside, the rain had intensified. The final stage of this G ahead. Elsa had left me no choice. Now it was going to end. The drive to the country house was long. Night wrapped the road in fog, as though trying to hide the traces of the events I was heading toward. The forest lining the highway seemed like a silent witness to untold secrets. I knew this house. We had spent summer weekends here with the kids. It seemed almost poetic that it had now become her refuge, the place she fled to avoid consequences. When I arrived, everything was quiet. A light glowed in the living room, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. 2 figures, Elsa and someone else. I tightened my grip on T's steering wheel, feeling a surge of cold fury. I parked a short distance away and stepped out, moving toward the house under the cover of darkness. Peering through the windows, I saw more details. Elsa was seated on the couch with a glass of wine, and beside her was a younger man. Tall, fit with a casual haircut. He wore a simple white shirt, unbuttoned at the top, and jeans. They were laughing, She looked at him with the kind of gaze that had once been reserved only for me. The rage within me boiled over. All of this, the mercenaries, the lawyers, the fake documents, had been orchestrated so she could enjoy her life with this man. I circled the house and peeked through the glass kitchen door. It was slightly ajar. Memories of sunbathing on this terrace and playing with the kids in the yard now felt foreign, tainted by her betrayal. I stepped inside. The only sounds were their laughter, cutting through the silence. The gun in my hand felt heavy, but I was ready for what was to come. When I appeared in the doorway of the living room, Elsa noticed me first. Her face froze horror for a split second before she tried to regain composure. "Michael," she began, but her voice faltered. "What are you doing here?" The young man jumped to his feet, but his cocky smirk quickly disappeared when he saw the gun in my hand. "Sit down," I barked, aiming the weapon. He sank back onto the couch, not taking his eyes on me. "This isn't what you think," Elsa stammered, her voice strained with false confidence. "You don't understand." "Shut up," I cut her off. "I understand perfectly. You wanted to kill me so you could live here, Wyham? You thought I'd just disappear, that you'd pull all this off and face no consequences, Michael. Please," she pleaded, trying to stand, but I stepped forward, pointing the gun at her face. "Sit down," I commanded, and she obeyed, sinking back onto the couch. The man tried to say something, but the look I gave him silenced him instantly. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, kid," I said, addressing him. "She used you, just like she used all of us." "That's not true," Elsa shouted. "I didn't use anyone." Enough!" I roared, silencing her. "You betrayed me. You tried to destroy everything we built together. And for what? For him? For money?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised my hand to stop her. "I loved you, Elsa. I trusted you. And now here I am with a gun in my hand because you decided I wasn't worth keeping alive.